Hey everybody, this is Matt Atkinson, and you're watching Forward Gettysburg with Aaron Smith.
The single bloodiest day in American history. That's how the Battle of Antietam is known. My name is Aaron Smith and I'm with Forward Gettysburg. Thank you all so much for joining me. I am on the road again today and we are going to talk about the Battle of Antietam. I'm here in Sharpsburg, Maryland. It's a beautiful summer day, a little bit overcast, but hey, who am I to complain? So I'm here on the Poffenberger Farm. The Joseph Poffenberger Farm is directly behind me. And on September 17th, this is going to be where the Union lines are. On September 17th of 1862, the Union, they're going to launch the initial attacks of the Battle of Sharpsburg, the Battle of Antietam, from here. So how did we get to Maryland? Well, Robert E. Lee defeated the Union Army at the Second Battle of Manassas. Defeated them pretty overwhelmingly, a pretty incredible battle for the South. So Robert E. Lee, riding high on that victory, decided that it was time to bring the war to the North. He realized that in order to achieve the Confederate goal of an independent state, that they would not succeed fighting a defensive war on Confederate soil. They needed to bring the fight to the North. So Robert E. Lee, in September of 1862, on September the 4th, he is going to cross the Potomac River, that natural barrier between Maryland and Virginia, that natural barrier between the North and the South. He is going to cross that river into Maryland, and he is going to kind of hang out in the Frederick, Maryland area for quite some time. Now they're going to leave camp from Frederick and they're going to head a little bit to the west, and now McClellan, George McClellan, that man we love to hate, Little Mac, the young Napoleon, he is going to find one of the greatest finds in military intelligence history, and that is going to be Order 191 from Robert E. Lee. This particular copy of the order was sent to D.H. Hill, Daniel Harvey Hill, one of Lee's commanders. And the order is going to outline the exact Confederate plan and positions during this Maryland campaign. This letter is going to be found wrapped in some cigars, and it's going to be found by some men of the 27th Indiana, and this is an incredible find. McClellan now has Robert E. Lee. There's no way that he can lose. However, McClellan, being, well, McClellan, he is going to be overly cautious. He is getting mixed reports about the strength of the Confederates. Now, McClellan does have some forces around Washington, and there's a garrison at Harper's Ferry, or, well, there was a garrison at Harper's Ferry until Stonewall Jackson took that town in the greatest capture of American troops ever in American history. 12,500 men are going to be captured at Harper's Ferry. But McClellan does have some access to some more resources and reinforcements. His force, the Army of the Potomac, their strength is around 87,000 men. Now, what McClellan doesn't know is that Robert E. Lee truly has marched into Maryland with a force of around 60,000. But many of those men, 26 of his 40 brigades, they're at Harper's Ferry still. There are going to be some very important clashes in South Mountain, the Battle of South Mountain. We're talking about Fox's Gap, Turner's Gap, and Crampton's Gap. And those battles are going to make Robert E. Lee kind of reconsider his invasion of the North, his invasion route. And it kind of puts him in an odd position. You know, he quickly realizes that he's very much outnumbered, but he knows that McClellan is McClellan, and he's going to act incredibly cautiously. So Lee is going to fall back to the town of Sharpsburg. And it's at Sharpsburg Robert E. Lee makes one of the most daring decisions of the Civil War, he's going to decide to make a stand around the rolling hills of this small Maryland farm town in Washington County. However, Lee still has many of his forces at Harper's Ferry, so he's going to send for them at once. As his forces start to trickle in towards Sharpsburg, nestled between the Potomac River and the idyllic Antietam Creek, George McClellan prepares to assault Lee's positions. So I am being a little bit ambitious, and I'm trying to cover the entire Battle of Antietam within a 20 to 30 minute YouTube episode. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to try to stay out of the weeds. We're going to try to look at this from the macro perspective rather than the usual micro perspective approach I take, especially when it comes to the Battle of Gettysburg. But fret not, if this video is popular, I for sure will be making more Antietam videos. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I actually really love Antietam. I might even like Antietam more than I like Gettysburg. Whoa. All right, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I guess what I like about this battle, what I can appreciate, is that it's like a great intro to the Civil War for people that are just starting to get into the study of this great American conflict. It's an incredibly easy battle to follow. Geographically, chronologically, it's not a whole lot of simultaneous actions occurring on the field. So, phase 1, in the morning, around 5:30, 6 o'clock. Joseph Hooker's 1st Corps, they're going to make their way across the fields behind me from out of the North Woods. The North Woods being those woods just over there. They are going to make their way out of the woods, around 12,000 Union soldiers. Now, posted over here to defend them is going to be Stonewall Jackson's wing of the Confederate Army. Now again, his command is still a little bit depleted. He still has quite a few soldiers at Harper's Ferry, and they're trickling their way in onto this battlefield. None of these men knew that what awaited them as the North and the South clashed on these beautiful, picturesque fields in Maryland. They would quickly become embroiled in one of the most intense fights of the American Civil War. So in this area, we have Miller's cornfield, the infamous cornfield just over there. And that cornfield is going to be fought over. That cornfield will change hands some 14 times. It's just absolutely horrific fighting, back and forth through the corn. At one point, the North takes it, and then Hood's Texan Brigade, they are going to take it back, and then they're going to lose it again, and this is just going to go back and forth some 14 times. The fighting here is going to last some 4 hours, from around 6 o'clock to around 10:30 or so in the morning. What a way to start your day. Absolutely incredible. So we're going to have Joseph Hooker's 1st Corps, they're making their way, and then we're going to have Joseph K.F. Mansfield's 12th Corps, and they're going to make their way, and unfortunately Mansfield is going to be mortally wounded in the chest. He will die the next day. After the vicious attacks and counterattacks here in the cornfield, and further on at the Dunker Church, which we're going to get to next, around 25,000 Union soldiers and somewhere near 18,000 Confederate soldiers engaged in horrific wholesale slaughter and violence on these fields. At the end of the day, the North will lose over 7,000 men as casualties. The South, they will lose 6,000 men as casualties as a result just of the fighting here in the cornfield. Some 13,000 casualties in this area alone. Behind me stands the Dunker Church, one of the most popular places on the Antietam Battlefield, directly across from the Visitor Center. Now, the Dunkers, they were a sect of Christianity, the German Reformed Brethren Church. And the Dunker Church, at this point in the morning, during this incredibly bloody and violent, as Bruce Catton described it in one of his books, unadulterated violence of the morning. Eventually, the South, they're going to be pushed back to the Dunker Church and the West Woods. And we have the 1st Corps, we have the 12th Corps pushing. Then we have the 2nd Corps under Sumner. They're making their way and they're attacking. And part of the 2nd Corps is attacking this area. And the other part of the 2nd Corps, well, they're headed a little bit to the east. And they're going to attack the Sunken Road. So we now come upon phase 2 of the Battle of Antietam, both chronologically and geographically. We are here at the Sunken Road. Now, this is a shortcut road between the Boonesboro Road and the Hagerstown Pike. And this road was carved into the farm field through years and years and decades of shortcuts by wagons and horses and mules and livestock and people. So this is a nice little shortcut for the people here. And on September 17th, 1862, this is going to become a ready-made rifle trench for the men of D.H. Hill's division of the Army of Northern Virginia. And they're going to take places and positions here within this sunken road. And as you can see, they have a pretty great amount of cover. They have some nice fences, a perfect place to pick away at the oncoming Union soldiers. Over in this direction, behind them, they're going to have Miller's 4-gun battery of 12-pounder Napoleons. And they're going to be blasting away at those men of the 2nd Corps as they march over those farm fields. When they see the Confederates, they're going to describe coming upon the enemy force in some sizable number. Now, the fight here at Bloody Lane, we had about 10,000 Union soldiers, and there's about 7,000 Confederate soldiers when everything is all said and done. The Union, they're going to attack, and there's going to be a great back and forth. They're going to be driven back, counterattack, and eventually, down there by the Antietam Tower, the Irish Brigade, under Meagher, they're finally going to come upon the flank of the Confederates, and they're going to fire down this line on their flank, causing a terrible, terrible loss of life. And eventually the Confederates are going to retreat. Had to move out of the way. See, it goes to show you that even in modern times, this is used as a shortcut road. But the Confederates are going to fall back, and the Union, they're going to stall. And as they stall, they're going to be pounded by Miller's battery, and their attack is going to stop right here. Now, they had broken through Robert E. Lee's center. They had captured the center of his line. Their plan was to divide his forces into two and destroy them summarily. And they came so close, but McClellan, being, well, McClellan, he stops. And that is the theme of the day. The fighting stopped up there by the Dunker Church, the cornfield, the West Woods. The fighting stopped. Here, when they had the initiative, when they had the Southern soldiers on the run, they stop. McClellan is still convinced that Robert E. Lee has forces far outnumbering him. He has put a lot of credence into this intelligence report that Lee has some 120,000 to 200,000 men on Maryland soil. Lee has a fraction of that. So there's going to be some skirmishing, but the Union is going to stop. And the next and final phase, the third phase of the Battle of Antietam, is going to take place at a little scenic spot called Rohrbach's Bridge. The total loss of life here is going to be about equal for both sides. Both sides are going to take about 30% casualties. The famed Irish Brigade, they are going to lose heavily in this area. But it's no doubt due to their successes and the success of Caldwell's brigade quickly behind them that the Union is able to break through the Confederate line here. However, their losses are, sadly it seems, for nothing because the Union stopped when they had the momentum. The thing that I really enjoy about the Antietam Battlefield is that, yes, there are monuments around, but it's nowhere near as, I don't know, for lack of a better term, littered maybe as Gettysburg is. That's the same reason why I love going to Spotsylvania as well, is because it's much more, I feel it's easier for me as an amateur historian and someone who reads a lot. It's much easier to interpret the ground without seeing all these different, I don't know, monuments and flank markers and stuff. As weird as that sounds, it just makes it easier for me, I guess, to envision in my mind of like, all right, this is how this went down. So that's kind of how I feel. Another reason I like Antietam is that, unlike Gettysburg, and don't get me wrong, I love Gettysburg, it is the Civil War mecca of the world, obviously. But the thing about Gettysburg is that Gettysburg has become very commercialized, and I can't say I'm a huge fan of all that. I can't say I'm a huge fan of seeing where Pickett's charge took place in those fields and looking out and seeing a McDonald's or, you know, or a KFC or something. I just feel it's very commercialized. I feel like the ghost tours take advantage of a terrible American tragedy, which was the Battle of Gettysburg. I feel like a lot of that kind of stuff, there shouldn't be very hokey tourist shops, you know, up and down areas where men fought and died. That's just how I feel. So that's why I like Antietam. I feel like the National Park Service, the town of Sharpsburg, Washington County, you know, all your different entities involved in making a military park like this happen, I feel like they've all done a really good job of zoning or whatever, of just making sure that this land, like when you're here, when you drive in, it's just a different feel to it. You just know that you are now in hallowed ground. There's a solemnness to this area. There's a solemnness to all of this here, and it's very humbling. And every time I'm here, I just reflect. And don't get me wrong, I get that same feeling at Gettysburg and everything. But it's just, I don't know. It just has a different. Sharpsburg and Antietam just has a different tone to it. Behind me stands one of the most famous bridges in America, Rohrbach Bridge. The Lower Bridge, or as we know it today, the Burnside Bridge. This was Phase 3 of the Battle of Antietam. Burnside's 9th Corps was originally supposed to pass this bridge around 9:30 in the morning, simultaneously with the attacks of the 1st and the 12th Corps in order to squeeze Lee. But Burnside is going to be delayed, and his assault on the Rohrbach Bridge isn't going to get off until later that day, sometime around midday, very early afternoon. Now, defending this area for the Army of Northern Virginia is going to be Toombs's brigade of Georgians, around 500 men. Now, there were more reinforcements here, but Robert E. Lee had stripped them away to reinforce other parts of his line. So Toombs's Georgians were the only Confederates in this area. Now, not only did these 500 men have to defend the bridge, but they also had to defend Snavely's Ford, just over that way south of Rohrbach's Bridge. The North, they're going to launch their assaults. Burnside, he's going to launch his assaults. And of course, all the Union men coming into this area, concentrating on that bridge, they are going to be repulsed time and time again. Now, the Georgians have some pretty distinct advantages to their position. As you can see, I'm right where their line would have been up in the hills, and they would have easily had the uphill ground advantage on the Yankees. Not only that, but the Yankees are all bottlenecking at this bridge, and they're going to be just all lined up perfect for artillery fire, for small arms fire. They're going to get absolutely decimated time and time again. But eventually, the North, the Union, they're going to be able to come across that Snavely's Ford just south of there, and now they're in the right flank of Toombs's Georgians. Not only that, but they're going to ford the Antietam Creek just north of this position as well. So now those 500 Georgians slowly dwindling down, they are going to be facing attack from 3 different directions, and they are eventually going to fall back from this position. However, Burnside, even though he has the momentum and the initiative on his side, he's going to get his entire corps across the bridge, and they're going to stop, and they're going to regroup, and that's going to take them about 2 hours to do that. At that point, we have A.P. Hill's Light Division making an incredibly grueling forced march from Harper's Ferry, and that is about 17 miles away from here. Man, I tell you what, these bugs are killer. Holy moly, get out of here. And it's very important that A.P. Hill reaches the battlefield as fast as possible, because these Union men, these Ninth Corps men, they are making for Robert E. Lee's main route of supply and his main route of retreat. Luckily, out of something that seems like the stuff of legends, A.P. Hill's Light Division is going to reach the battlefield, and they're going to push back the 9th Corps incredibly, just in the nick of time. Now, Burnside's Bridge, like I said, it's probably one of the most famous bridges, structures in all of history. Certainly in the Civil War, I cannot think of a more iconic structure than Burnside's Bridge. I can't even imagine what it was like being a man on the Union side coming across this bridge. It had to take an incredible amount of courage. In fact, one order came to the 51st Pennsylvania. And the 51st Pennsylvania, on their march here towards Sharpsburg, they were under discipline for some rowdiness. So they had their whiskey rations taken away from them. So they get the order to take the hills just on the other side of the bridge. And the men say, "We can take those hills, sir, but we'd like our whiskey rations back." And the General Ferrero, he says, he agrees. He says, "Yes, you can have your whiskey rations back." So just a very funny, kind of a personal story here at Burnside Bridge. But this is a super, super iconic piece of architecture that when you think American Civil War, you know, you certainly think of Burnside Bridge. And I guess what I'm getting at is the Battle of Antietam, it's going to end that evening as darkness falls. It's going to be a tactical draw. Yes, the North certainly had some great advantages. They certainly pushed the Confederates back at some very, very key spots, but McClellan's cautiousness is going to cost him an incredible victory here at Sharpsburg. He's not going to push them any further once night falls. Robert E. Lee, on the other hand, he held mostly his ground. He held the city of Sharpsburg miraculously, and the next day he's going to regroup and redress, and he's going to invite battle to McClellan, who is still under the impression that Robert E. Lee at least matches, if not outnumbers, his forces. And McClellan is not going to bite on Lee's bait September 18th, and the battle will come to a draw. Robert E. Lee will fall back into Virginia, so I suppose that's considered a success for the North. At least they thought it was enough of a success that McClellan is going to report a great victory back to Washington. And Abraham Lincoln is going to run with this victory. And later, at the end of 1862, he is going to draft the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing all the slaves held in southern states. So Antietam is certainly a very important key battle in the American Civil War. When everything's done and over with, there are going to be an incredible 23,000 casualties, some 17,000 men wounded, some 4,000 men just passed off the face of the earth. Another 2,000 are going to be missing or captured. The bloodiest single day in American history occurred right here at this bridge behind me and in the farm fields in its immediate vicinity. To put that in a Gettysburg-centric perspective, which happens to be my life a lot, 23,000 casualties is nearly half the casualties of Gettysburg, give or take about 5,000. We're talking just slightly less than half the casualties of Gettysburg. A 3-day affair, mind you, occurred within 12 hours from around 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening. That is, to put it into a perspective like that, is absolutely mind-blowing. This is such a hallowed place. This is such hallowed ground. Just to stand here in these hills where these Georgians for several hours fought off an entire corps, some 12,000 men, versus 500 is absolutely incredible. I get chills. I just get chills thinking about it. It's so cool to be here. I love Antietam. So that is what I have for you guys today. Like I said, just a very, very brief kind of overview of the Battle of Antietam. And like I said, if this video does really well, I want to get back down here. It's maybe an hour drive or so for me. I want to get back down here and start doing more videos, maybe going in depth about the cornfield or the different regiments that were passing over this bridge. I think would be really, really cool. But for the sake of brevity, I just wanted to have kind of a big zoomed out look at one of the most incredible battles of the American Civil War and one of the most incredible battles in all of American history. Thank you so, so much for joining me today. It's good to be back out on a battlefield. It's not Gettysburg. I'm on the road, but I've been wanting to come down here, especially to check out the new visitor center for quite some time. In the past, every time I get down to Antietam, it's closed. So it was really, really cool to be able to come down here and see the new visitor center, see what they've been working on for such a long time. So this is the Battle of Antietam. This is Forward Gettysburg on the road. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Smith. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you guys so much for all of the continued support. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate all of that. As always, I'm Aaron Smith for Forward Gettysburg, and I will catch you on the next one.